Well, hello everyone. My name is Dave McCormack. 17 years ago, I moved to Petersburg, Virginia. Great. Okay. Well, 17 years ago, if I would have said that to someone, they look back at me like they smelled a fart. For 30 years, maybe more, it's just been a total mess down there. We got racial strife, high crime, terrible schools, biker gangs, and tornadoes that rip through downtown and just tear everything apart. So it's really a disaster. But I'm really drawn to places like that. I'm drawn to buildings in places like that. When you have a really chaotic situation, it really allows us to be really creative. You're not really kind of held back by comp plans or the market or really any expectations at all. So I didn't come up in the development world. I'm really a writer and a musician by trade. And when I moved to Petersburg, I moved there in a camper van and lived on a lot surrounded by barbed wire. I wish I had pictures of that. I didn't know I'd be doing this one day. But I bought my first building not long after that. It was this crazy old warehouse. You see it in the picture here. And I didn't know what I should pay. I didn't know what the value of this thing was. And the seller didn't either. So I called a friend of mine who's in real estate up here in Richmond, and asked for some advice on valuation. Told him I was investing in Petersburg, and he responded by telling me I was a total idiot. Since that time, we've invested $50 million in that town. We've created 500 apartments, 4 restaurants, a movie studio, and a brewery. Yeah, I own Trapezium Brewing, if anybody's heard that. So I'm glad that you have. That's great. We've also, in that little 6-block neighborhood, created 100 jobs, more than 100 jobs. And in that little 6-block area right around where I lived behind that barbed wire, the businesses do $6 million annually. So it's really amazing. So that's what I do for a living now. I go to small towns all through Virginia and North Carolina. And, a lot of these places are like Clarksville, Blackstone, Bedford, Martinsville, Vinton. And these are places, developers just don't go. And really, there's this issue with valuation, same problem I had in Petersburg. Valuation is really directly proportional to this collective bet that we make on the future. And when you're in a place or in a building like this, and there's no hope, the value is really zero. And when you have a building like this, sometimes it's a negative number, which is really a chaotic situation. So, and developers really, I realize I call myself a developer, I guess, for lack of a better word, but developers really are not visionary people, ultimately, right? They just want to make money. They want a sure thing. They want to know what their building is going to work out. And after all, they're borrowing money from banks, and banks are really risk averse. They want to get their money back. And the way developers and banks figure out if the project's going to work, they get what's called a market study. We go out and see and take a look at the things that have already been built that look like the thing you want to build. And if they work and they make money, then you have an opportunity to do that. But in small towns, a lot of this stuff doesn't exist at all. And when a market study says it doesn't exist, it by default will not work. And so it kills the project. Market studies, in a way, are kind of a formalization of conventional wisdom. And conventional wisdom kills these projects faster than the lack of financing ever will. But doing all this work that I do in these small towns, I realize that the people that live in these places, they want the same quality experience that people in cool towns do, like Seattle and Austin and Richmond. And there's amazing things going on there. You've got these great buildings. Some of them may not be in great shape, but amazing history, amazing maybe food culture in some way, or agricultural history, and really amazing, super talented people. And so my job is to go into places like this when we're looking at maybe a building or even an entire town sometimes, and look at those things. And those things are the real asset. And my job is to aggregate that stuff and look at maybe this chaotic situation and capitalize on that chaos. And from that kind of feeling of nothingness, create a somethingness. So an example, I was just very recently out in Amherst County. And if you know Amherst County at all, it's 20, 30 miles north of Lynchburg and 2 hours west of here. And it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, really. And, well, you know this place. Okay, so anyway, it's a beautiful county. It's really amazing, but it's got some of the lowest property values I've seen. The dollar per acre there is like super low for the state of Virginia. And really, because there's nothing going on. It's a place developers really just don't go. There's no market. And I was out there on a tour with an economic development person, and we went by this old flour mill. It's called the Amherst Milling Company. It's a super cool building, but it's just a disaster, really, in terms of it's got massive structural problems. It's the paint's peeling. It's almost, looks like a collapse in places. And there's a water wheel on it that's at a plumb, like 10 degrees, totally rusty. It's cool, but I don't know what it's worth. And there's this old man there named Bill. He's pushing 80 years old, and he's just barely holding it together. He runs a feed and seed company, and I don't think he makes a dime. But I went out there and looked at it, and it's a beautiful place, got a lot of history, but the question is, like, what do you do with this thing, So I can say, well, I'm going to walk away. It's not worth anything, or we can try to figure it out. It's been on the market for 3 years, and no one's even made an offer. So the perception of value is zero out there. So I've got this, own this brewing company. I have this background now, and kind of looked at it through special eyes and those particular eyes, and looked at this thing and said, it's really not that far from the Brew Ridge Trail out there on 151. That's the home of Devil's Backbone, Bold Rock Cider, Blue Mountain Barrel House. In fact, this thing's like 10 minutes south of Blue Mountain Barrel House, right on Route 29. And so we kind of re-looked at it. We looked at the pastoral landscape out there, and we thought, well, can we do something with this? Can we grow fruit trees and raise bees and collect wild yeast from the air? Can we get that? People do this stuff. I wondered, could we get that water wheel going in? Could we get Bill, the old man who knows everything about this mill? He can reach into the dark recesses of places and flick switches, and stuff comes to life. It's really interesting. But he knows how to get that wheel running. So our question was, could we assemble all these pieces and parts and really make something special? We decided to do that. We're going to announce very soon what we call Trapezium West. We're going to make wild ale beers, and we're going to get that water wheel going again. And instead of making flour this time, we're going to make electricity. And we hope to be, I think we'll be the first hydro-powered brewery in the United States. I'm glad that resonates with you. Sometimes you pitch these ideas, and everybody says that's really cool, or when they work out, it's really cool. But when you pitch them, it just can confuse people. You get that face that I was talking about with Petersburg, and I was giving, but I think really if we're going to affect change and get something going, we've got to buck conventional wisdom. We've got to pull people out of their comfort zone if we're really going to do something special. I was giving a talk in the city of Hopewell. There was an event where folks like me or stakeholders, entrepreneurs were invited to come up and give a talk, this thing was called Excite Hopewell, and you could just throw out these ideas. There was just out-of-the-box ideas, whatever you want to say. There was no ramification. Just go crazy and have fun with it. So I said yes, decided to do it, and I went. I'm a big fan of seaplanes. I'm a budding pilot. I do not have my license, but seaplanes have always been really romantic to me. If you remember at the Vancouver Olympics, there was that little stone statue that they had as the icon, but really all the commentators were sitting at the water, and you saw the seaplanes landing and taking off behind them. It just was a really romantic vision to me. So I read this quarterly magazine called Water Flying. I may be the only person in the state that reads this thing. But I learned reading that seaplane pilots really want a really specific set of parameters. They want water depth that has to kind of, be enough to land in. They don't want salt water or brackish water that'll ruin their metal. They want really neat visual landscape to fly over. And when they land, they want to be close to somewhere cool when they get out of the plane. They also don't want to be in congested airspace. And in the big towns, you have restricted airspace. It makes it hard to be comfortable in that area. So I looked up and down the East Coast, and it struck me there was really only one city that fit that bill, and it was Hopewell. So I decided to make this pitch that night, and I followed someone who had just pitched like a yoga studio or something like that. And so I said this out loud in front of 150 people, and the reaction wasn't, yeah, let's do this thing. It was just like total silence. And I scanned the crowd, and I could see in a few faces, I saw the fart face. But I knew right then we were onto something really big. Thank you very much.